talk about the beautiful sound of open D tuning. And if you've not explored alternate tunings before, I think open D is a pretty good place to start. It sounds great. It's actually quite easy to get to grips with. So in this video, I'm going to be talking generally about open D tuning. We're also going to be learning a great song in this tuning. That's Forever by Roy Harper that I just played a snippet from. So let's get started. Let's tune up then. And for those of you not familiar with open D tuning, we're basically just going to tune the strings of our guitar to the notes in a D chord, which of course are D, F sharp and A. That's the root, third and fifth of a D major chord. What we're not doing is tuning to the sound of this particular D chord here. I think that's what sometimes people think, but that's not open D tuning as it's generally understood. In fact, the way that I like to think about it is we're tuning to the sound of a bar chord. So this is a D major bar chord. We're going to play those notes an octave lower those, so that might be helpful if you want to remember exactly how this tuning works. So if you look at the notes in a D major bar chord here, we've got D, A, D, F sharp, A and D. So what we can do, I'd like to start by dropping the low E down to a D. You can use your open D string as a reference. Until that sounds fairly close. And then the A and the D strings are going to sound the same. I will probably next tune my high E string down to a D as well. Just tune that down until it sounds close. We've got the B string tuned down to an A, so we've got an A string here that we can use as a reference. Finally, we need to tune the third string. It's going from a G to an F sharp. We haven't got a reference pitch here, but it's actually quite easy to hear it if you just strum the strings. And drop it down until it sounds like a major chord. There we have open D tuning. Sounds pretty good. I think it's a good exercise to try and do that by ear, just to try and improve your ear and your sensitivity to tuning. I would normally then check everything with a tuner anyway, particularly if I'm playing with other people doing some kind of performance. Let's get to know this tuning then. I think you've got a couple of options when you're exploring a brand new tuning. And the first of them is just to mess around, and that's probably my favourite option, I think. Open tunings are a great way of defamiliarising the guitar, and suddenly you put your fingers in familiar places and you've got different sounds coming out, and that's quite exciting and can be quite inspiring. So that's the first thing I would do. But then you might also like to come at the tuning and really try and understand it. So think about the intervals and think about exactly how the tuning works. One of the great things about open D and some other open tunings is it does a lot of the work for you. Just the open strings on their own sound great. So with your fretting hand, you can actually be quite minimal. A lot of my favourite open D chord shapes are just using one or two fingers, and you might like to start by just changing the bass note or changing the notes along the length of one of the other strings. What about the third string? So it sounds very cool, and I'm actually doing very little, and I think a lot of folky and singer-songwritery stuff with open tunings is exploring the tuning in that kind of way. You're not really playing conventional major or minor shapes. You're really just exploring the sound of the tuning as kind of a modal thing. You've not really got chord changes. It's just the sound of those notes droning away and then playing melodies on top. But if you did want to play more conventional major and minor chords, you can of course do that. And it's actually worth having some kind of understanding of the way this tuning works. So the intervals in this tuning work like this. We've got a D, A, D, so that's root, fifth and root. So the lowest three strings are actually just a power chord. So you can kind of do one finger power chord stuff if you want to. And then if you continue through the strings, we've got the third string. That's giving you the major third. That's the note that's telling you it's a major chord tuning. And then we've got another A note, that's another fifth, and then another root note on top. So if you strum all of the strings, you've got a major chord, and you can of course play one finger major chords up and down the neck. One of the reasons this tuning is liked by slide players, of course, you can kind of slide up and down the neck and you've got that nice major chord sound. Now if you want to play minor chords, that's a little bit tricky. If you think about it, you've got to change the third, which is the note found on the third string. You've got to drop that down one fret. So I don't know if it's really possible to kind of finger all six strings and do that, but one way you could play a minor chord would just be to play a triad. So on strings 2, 3, 4, you got a major triad, drop the note on the third string down one fret, you got a minor triad. If you wanted to, you could add in a bass note as well. So that's one way of playing a minor triad. You might like to be even more minimal than that and just play roots and thirds in kind of a tense fashion. That's a very common thing to do on fingerstyle guitars. So you've got your major chord there, and then you'd have the minor sound like that, so minor tenths, and you can kind of go up through the scale. It's kind of blackbird fashion. Sixth on the third and fifth strings also sound good, so these kind of shapes. And then you can add in some droning strings as well. So So a few ideas there for you to play around with, and I thought it was just important to point out the similarity between open D tuning and open E tuning. And to all intents and purposes, they're the same thing. Both those tunings have got the same interval structure. They're giving you that bar chord kind of sound. It's just with open E, you're tuning up 3 strings, I think, and then in open D, you're tuning down. So they do feel slightly different, but if you're familiar with open D, then you'll be comfortable playing in open E as well. And in fact, many folk players or singer-songwriters are going to be using a capo anyway, which is further going to blur the distinctions between these tunings. So open D with a capo at the 4th fret is going to be identical more or less to open E with a capo at the 2nd fret. Let's move on then and talk about this song Forever by Roy Harper. And if you're not familiar with Roy Harper, you probably should be. He's one of the great British folk artists, I think. Famously, he was a big influence on Jimmy Page. And this is a lovely song. It's from his first album, Sophisticated Beggar, came out in the mid-60s. And I think this is a great introduction to the open D tuning, along with, I think, Vestapol. I've done a lesson on Vestapol a little while back. I'll put a link to that somewhere on the screen. That's another must-know open D tuning piece of music. I've got a capo at the 4th fret for this one, and with this type of fingerstyle piece it can be quite tedious explaining every single thing that's going on in both hands, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to assume you've got a little bit of fingerstyle experience, and if you know some basic fingerstyle patterns, this one isn't actually that difficult to play. If you're completely new to fingerstyle, then you might want to check out a video I did on essential fingerstyle patterns, and I think nearly every picking pattern found in this song is covered in that video. Let's start with the opening phrase then. So most of this is played with an alternating bass in the thumb, so often just going from string 6 to 4. Sometimes it's going from 5 to 3. So set that up first, and then we just got a melody on top. This is the vocal melody. So, and then you just need to combine those two things. So for that second bar there, the bass is changing. It's going from 6 to 4 to 5 to 3. So dropping the bass and then back. Just got some connecting bass notes there just coming down on the low E string. And that's the introduction. Then he starts singing, and the verse starts exactly the same way, so we just repeat that section one more time. Then we've got this. That's the falling through an eternal horizon of time bit. So it's just a simple shape that we're fretting here. This is just the what is that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th fret on the 3rd and 4th strings. And again, a very simple, very standard picking pattern. Back to the open strings. So that's the first half of the verse. We're just spinning leaves in the flight of a dull little girl, falling through an endless horizon of time. And then the second half of the verse just develops that melody a little bit further. So we've got but as we lie here, I like to think that all of this will be ours forever. So again, just keeping the bass going and playing that melody on the top string. So got another one of those little bass walk downs there as well. So I'm just hammering down onto the 4th fret on the low E string. So that's the complete first verse. And then for the chorus, we've got that same shape that we had earlier on in the verse. It's those two notes at the 5th fret on the 3rd and 4th string. So just going between that and the open strings. Sometimes we're just hammering down from the open 3rd string to the 5th fret. So don't you think we're forever? Don't you think we're forever? So that's it for the verse and chorus. It all goes round one more time. Again, lots of slight variations as he repeats. He's not playing it exactly the same way twice, as is the way with a lot of this folky kind of stuff. But this is the essence, I think, of what is going on here. So that's the basis of the song, but we've also got some nice instrumental stuff happening as well. And in fact, if you don't sing or you don't want to sing and play this song, it does stand up pretty well as a standalone solo piece, because for the most part we're playing the melodies on the guitar. But what happens on the Roy Harper recording is we've got verse, chorus, then we've got an instrumental verse, and then he goes into this great harmonics based part. So just playing a very standard fingerstyle pattern, but with harmonics. So I'm laying my little finger across all of the frets here at the, I'm going to have to count this again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at the 7th fret relative to the capo. So just need to rest that finger, it doesn't have to be your little finger, it could be one of your other fingers, very lightly over the frets so that those harmonics come through. and then just doing that same thing 2 frets lower. And it just goes to the open strings. So that's the first little instrumental break. And then towards the end of the song we've got more new material, more instrumental stuff, and he goes into these quite dissonant sounding chords. But again, quite easy to play. It's all just shape based. We've got that same 2-finger shape that we had in the chorus, but we're going 1 fret higher. Lovely sound. I don't know exactly what that chord would be, but it sounds great. Just moving that down fret by fret. And then down to the open strings. Then we've got more harmonics as before. Got this part here, so this is just a harmonic played at the 5th fret on the top string along with that finger picking pattern. So it's quite hard to bring that harmonic out. You really have to just rest your finger very lightly and then immediately release it to get the harmonic. I'm not getting it as loud as Roy Harper seems to get his. It might just be because I've got really old strings on this guitar. Maybe I'm due a string change. That seems to help with harmonics. But and then we're into the outro of the song, and that goes like this. So again, based on some quite simple shapes here. So we've got frets 5 and 4 on the 4th and 3rd strings. Again, lovely sounding chord. Down to the open strings, and then that same shape down near the capo. So open strings, and that repeats. Don't ever let me go. Quite nicely there at the end. So that's that. Do check out my tab if I've whizzed through some of this too quickly for you. I know by this point it's probably been a really long video already, but with this kind of thing sometimes the details are important, so that's all going to be in my tab for those of you who are interested. Let me talk about the gear that I'm using in this video then, and not that much to say since I'm in acoustic mode this week, but the guitar is a Martin 0015M, which is one of my favourite acoustic guitars, particularly for fingerstyle stuff, with some very old strings actually, and you might be able to see this on video. I hope you can't see it too clearly on video, but the strings are quite encrusted in crud, which I do actually like for acoustic guitars. I hate that really zingy, bright new string sound, but to be honest, these strings have probably reached the end of their life and a string change is overdue. I was noticing the intonation and just getting some of those harmonics was a little bit tricky, so I will probably change the strings on this one soon, but I'm not looking forward to that playing in period where you have to put up with that horrible bright zingy acoustic guitar sound. So that's Open D tuning. If you're in the mood for more Open D, then you might like to check out that Vestapol lesson that I mentioned earlier, and if you want to learn the Roy Harper track, then you might want to check out my tab. I've tabbed out the entire track note for note off the original recording. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time.